If you are in the UK, good evening. If you're in the US or Canada, good afternoon. Or if you're in Australia or Japan, good morning. On today's show, I speak to a guy who's worked for some of the biggest promotions ever: TNA, Ring of Honor, Imp 1PW, Rev Pro. I'm sure I've missed a lot on that list. Would I agree?
I think we could just do the whole broadcast listing off the promotions.
I cannot wait to go. We've got loads to get through. But first, intern, roll the intro. And please welcome my guest, the one and only Joe Dombrowski. How are we?
I'm feeling great. I appreciate the platform that you're giving me and an opportunity to talk a little bit to all of your fans, my fans, our fans, whoever may be out there. And I'm just loving life and tackling each day and each adventure as it comes to me. And that's the thing in pro wrestling. There is never monotony. You never get bored.
That is true. That is true. And obviously, I know you're a busy man, so I do appreciate obviously taking the time to talk to us. So, yeah, I mean, busy week. Have you had a busy week?
The busy week, the busy part of the week hasn't happened yet. There's always projects to do. I'm always working on something, but I am, as we record this, about 13 hours away from leaving home for the weekend, and I'm going to be on an expedition to Connecticut, Massachusetts, and then back down to the other side of where I am now in Pennsylvania, because I am going on a little bit of a, let's say, archival footage expedition to get some new content, get some new merch I'll be selling in my travels. And I'm excited about that because one of my passions is uncovering parts of our great business that we all love so much that have been kind of lost to time. And maybe a whole new audience can appreciate it. And I may be bringing some of those things this weekend to the Icons of Wrestling convention at the ECW Arena on Saturday. I'll be on play-by-play for the Battleground event that evening, headlined by Matt Cardona, the self-professed indie god himself, taking on Bully Ray in Bully Ray's house, the former ECW Arena. So that'll be live on Fight TV as well. So going to be a fun weekend. The amount of hours you're in a car ticks up to double digits in the course of a day or two. It's testing, but it's what I signed up for.
There you go. There you go. Obviously, we just had Matt Cardona at 1PW against Will Ospreay. What do you think to that match?
I loved it because you have two very polarizing individuals, and I don't know if there's a fan you can walk up to that knows Will Ospreay, that knows Matt Cardona on a consistent level that you can ask their opinion of, and they're going to say, yeah, he's all right. You either love them or you hate them. And they're both so good at doing both. They're both so good at pushing buttons when they need to, and they're both so good at showing you what their value is and why they're here. And the only time I'd worked with Will until 1PW had been the one time I was at Rev Pro. So to me, it's a long time coming. And Matt Cardona, I mean, we share a similar love of course, memorabilia and action figures and things of that nature. And he always knows how to keep his name in the headlines. So to me, that match was perfect.
There you go. It's a great match. Go and watch it, people. Watch it back. It's absolutely amazing. So, yeah. So, obviously, today's show, we're going to obviously learn about you. So, I'm going to reference, obviously, your About Me page because you've got absolutely loads of information on there. And the first thing that caught my eye was total matches called as of commentator 7,018 from June 18th, 2022. I imagine that's a lot more now.
Yeah, that shows you how time-consuming it is to update that number that I haven't done it in a year. But actually, I didn't do it yet. But I'm in the process of doing it to get in the updated tally. What was that number again?
It is 7,018.
Okay, yeah, we are. We're rapidly on the road to 8K. But I love it. I mean, it's how many people, whether it's wrestler, referee, announcer, anything, can say they've been involved in that many matches and run that many different scopes of variety. You know, I've done the X Division matches and the cruiserweight matches, and I've done Rock and Roll Express in a high school in North Carolina in front of a bunch of Jim Crockett Promotions fans. You know, I've done death match tournaments. I've done lucha libre. I've done Japanese style. I've done European style. If there's a style out there, I think I've touched it at some point. But yeah, and that is over the course of, at that time, 19 and a half years, which is now 20 and a half years. That number.
Wow. That's absolutely crazy. So, yeah, so obviously you started in wrestling when you were 16. You went to see the Jerry the King Lawler versus Kamala. Talk about, obviously, that experience.
When I was 5 or 6 years old, I was able to get my hands on a VHS tape of what was called the Missing Matches series, where they would repurpose old territory footage of guys that now were WWF stars. And I didn't know who Jerry Lawler was, but I knew he was beating up all the guys I watched on TV. Hulk Hogan and Macho Man and King Kong Bundy and all these guys. And one of the matches was Lawler versus Kamala. So, of course, being a young kid and not to date myself, but obviously no YouTube, no internet, no streaming. You had physical media, and that was all you had. So I'm sure I would wear out those tapes time and time again. So I always had a soft spot for Jerry Lawler and Kamala. And you know, 10, 11 years later, listening to the local radio station, and there's an advertisement for IWC Pro Wrestling, July 20th, 2002, in Cannonsburg, Pennsylvania. And the main event was Jerry Lawler versus Kamala, and sold, hooked. You know, I'd watched a little bit of independent wrestling when it was on television in the boom of the late 90s. I attended one event as a little kid when I was about 8 years old, but I didn't really follow the scene. But Lawler and Kamala, that drew me in, but all the other talent on the event is what kept me, because that was my first time seeing Colt Cabana. That was my first time seeing Chris Hero. That was my first time in a long time seeing guys like Christian York and Joey Matthews and Balls Mahoney and Little Guido and all the great Pittsburgh talent that I either remembered back when they were really young on TV or I was seeing for the first time. And to be there so close and to feel the energy, like this is at Matt Cross, my first time seeing Matt Cross as well. This is the place I belong as a fan, because I was kind of disenfranchised with WWFE at the time. TNA was just starting. Ring of Honor was just starting. There really wasn't that promotion to really dive headfirst into. But this is where I belong as a fan, and this is my way into the business. How and when, I don't know yet, but this is the path I need to get on.
Wow, absolutely. And obviously it says, after several months of following the promotion, a chance to get involved firsthand approach when the high school you attended needed a fundraiser. Talk about that.
I was in my Spanish class, and it's so funny how integral that Spanish class became to my career based on me doing Lucha Libre now, and the fact that that was the impetus of this entire thing, because we were trying to fund a field trip to New York to see, you know, the local Hispanic culture in that area, and I think go to a museum, if I recall correctly. And IWC had just done a fundraiser at another high school, a few miles away, probably 20 or 30 miles away, for I think maybe their football club or their athletic club or something like that. So I pitched the idea hey, I am literally in contact with an entire event we can bring here at a very affordable price, and low risk and potential for high return. And I basically middlemanned the communication between the wrestling promoter and my teacher. And next thing I know, there's a signed agreement. The school board approves of it, and I'm selling tickets and I'm hanging posters. And I was still 17 at that point. I just turned 17 as I was doing this. So state athletic commission says you can't really be involved in the event in like physical way till you're 18. So I couldn't like be a guest referee or a guest manager and like that. But having someone from the school involved is a plus. It helps the local interest. So I don't know if it was my idea or the promoter's idea, but I wound up on commentary with a man named Jeff Gorman, who had done some early Ring of Honor and was basically the voice of Pittsburgh wrestling for a number of years. And I don't mind telling you, that night I was awful. It was terrible because I had no idea what to do, how to do it. I was going in blind. But that got my sea legs under me, and it gave me that rep where like, okay, this is how it feels. This is how it works. Now that I'm in it, here's all the stuff I should have done to prepare that I didn't. I'll be a lot better prepared next time. So the show was a success. We had 350 people there, which I think was better than the company was doing on average at the time. Keep in mind, this is indie wrestling infancy. So, a lot different than it is now. And that got my foot in the door, and it got me talking and communicating with people in the company to where when they needed somebody to write website results, they thought of me, and I started doing that. When they needed somebody to do written interviews with talent, they thought of me. And that also meant that I was in the loop next time they needed a commentator when somebody couldn't make it. So about 6 or 8 months later, I kept filling in here and there, doing odd jobs here and there. And by August, they were really hard up for a commentator. All of the regulars weren't available. And I slipped into that spot, and I gave it hell. And I don't think I was polished. I don't think I was great. I think if I watched it now, I could critique the hell out of it. But it was enough for people to see something in me. And I've been sitting in that chair for IWC literally ever since.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. And obviously this match, was it a headline by Punk as well, if I remember rightly?
My first event, yeah, CM Punk and Jimmy Vegas for the IWC title. I was so pumped to see CM Punk there because he was obviously the straight edge guy, and my town was a big drug community, and I was so looking forward to CM Punk just reading everybody the riot act, but turned out he was a fan favorite that night. My dreams were dashed, but yeah, Punk was there. But my let's see, my 7th match I ever called was a CM Punk match.
Wow, awesome. And then obviously you moved on to obviously 1PW, which is obviously here in the UK. I mean, how did that all obviously start?
Dumb luck. Most of my big breaks, it's dumb luck, it's timing, and it's just being ready for the opportunity. Because if you had planned to do it the way I did it, would have never worked. But sometimes you just fall into these things. My graphics guy and my webmaster, Jesse Forney, had a contact in the UK of somebody that was helping 1PW book local talent. So he had the ear of the promoter, Stephen Gartley. And it was Stephen's first show. He was a novice promoter. He didn't know anybody or anything at that point. He was just learning on the fly. So when it came up to, well, who's going to be the commentary team? I don't think there were any ideas. But through those channels, my name came across his desk and we spoke. And he felt comfortable with it. In hindsight, probably a little too soon. Because I think the story of early 1PW is too much too soon.
Mm-hmm.
But for me at the time, God, I don't know any better, and I'm not going to say no. I'm 19, and someone's going to pay to fly me to another continent to do what I love. So, and from there, I was able to be valuable as far as contacting talent, booking the imports, the Americans, and lending whatever knowledge I could that I've been able to accrue over the past 2 years. As limited as it was, even at 19 years old and 2 years in, I was more seasoned than the promoter. So I was able to help in some ways. Obviously not always, but it was a lot of learn as you go. And I will never forget being in front of 1,500 fans for the first time. I'll never forget being in such a star-studded locker room and being able to learn so much just being around those people. It was a dream come true for me to be able to do so young. My only regret was it didn't last longer.
Yeah, and obviously, one PW's obviously come back now. Obviously, they came back last year. What's that like for you? Obviously, personally, obviously, the company coming back.
Surreal. It's something I never thought would happen. I mean, one PW had been through, unfortunately, some dark days after I had left the first time and the second time. 3 or 4 different owners, a lot of turmoil and drama and lack of trust. The brand was damaged. A lot of people didn't trust those initials anymore, including fans who had been burned on advertised talent, or the events run so long and they miss their train home, or whatever the case was. When you grow so fast, it's a great thing because you've got lightning in a bottle, but it also means all your mistakes are magnified and you don't have the luxury of learning anonymously.
Mm-hmm.
Where if I'm a rookie wrestler, I can just go to some hole in the wall building and try things in front of 20 or 30 people. 1PW is failing in front of 2,000 people. 1PW is failing on the internet where everybody can report about it in a second. And as the owners changed and as the money losses escalated, it kept failing in more grandiose fashion. So I never thought the brand would be back. And I never thought Stephen Gauntlet would be back because of the toll that took on his personal life and how long it took him to dig out of that hole. And you always hear the rumors every couple of years. Well, what if? Well, maybe. Well, we're thinking about this. But in wrestling, you don't believe it till it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, you're about 50% skeptical. So for Stephen Gauntlet to have reached out to me, whenever it was now, a year ago, and for him to be in a completely different place mentally, professionally, and personally than he was when we first did business together, and a desire to make things right because we had not ended on the best of terms, and a desire to make things right with others and make things right with the brand, and an actual business strategy to make money rather than just throw everything against the wall and hope it works. I can't tell you what went through my mind being able to sit in this seat and voice a new twist of fate 17 years after the first twist of fate. A lot of emotions, mostly positive. And whatever was still lingering from the negative melted away when I saw the product and how energized the crowd was and how motivated the talent was. And like having 1,500 fans in your first event, it's not realistic. It shouldn't happen. It shouldn't work. But 1PW did it twice. That's special. So to see the dome and capture that energy again, and to be back there in person like I was in April, and and actually see people I hadn't seen in 17 years, and see Mark Andrews, who I hadn't realized I hadn't seen in 10 years, and walk through the dome again and remember, oh, yeah, this was Jeff Jarrett's locker room in 2006. This is where the TNA talents dressed, and this is where the UK talents dressed, and this is where we set up the interview set, and this is where we had the press conference, and just a flood of memories back again, and it felt surreal because it's like a dream. You never thought you'd be back home in your home away from home, but I was there, and it felt right, and it felt long overdue.
Wow. I want to ask about obviously the press conference, obviously with the women, because obviously I was there as well. What was that like for you? Because I remember like going, this was the first time obviously I've seen you obviously in person, and I'm like, wow, this guy's absolutely terrific. What was that like for you?
I mean this in a good way, but chaos. Because it's not easy hosting a press conference with 7 different people, and 6 of them you're just meeting for the first time. And I think several of them I had met about 5 minutes before we were out there. So to have all those moving parts in your brain and know, all right, this is this person, she's done this, she's been here. A lot of gear shifting. But I was glad to do it because that's something that I can't do remotely. I can't do at home. I can't do in post-production. To be able to be in front of the VIP fans and be with the talent and be able to feed off of their emotion and speak with them and understand who they are so I can better call their match and tell their story. And it almost reminded me of doing I didn't do it, but I was in the same room for it. The first Twist of Fate press conference in 2005 when Sandman crashed it. And Sandman just took the mic and took over and started hosting and telling stories and taking questions and just being Sandman, which is the best way to say that. But back to the original point, the UK has a vibrant and growing women's division that doesn't get the attention it deserves. The tag teams, the cruiserweights, the open weights. I mean, I think a lot of times people just looked at the UK scene after NXT UK came in as an afterthought. And now we're seeing so many new talents come up and so many places and people rebuild. This is the time to shine. This is the time to show what the scene can do. And every single person I've met working there is passionate, is motivated, is talented, and to me is ready to take on the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously I want to take a few steps back and we want to talk about the fall of 2007 for Pro Wrestling Ohio. Talk about that.
After I had left 1PW, and again, timing, dumb luck, I wanted a new project to really dive into. And right around the time I was leaving 1PW, a local promotion in Cleveland, Ohio, had started on regional sports television throughout the state. And after a 1-year run there were some differences with management, and there was a split, as there so often is in wrestling. And the promoter of that company was not interested in maintaining the television contract, but a lot of the rest of us were. So me and the production crew and the director of sales and some of the talent broke off and did our own thing and had a great 6-year run on that cable sports channel doing Pro Wrestling Ohio, which we eventually rebranded to Prime Wrestling as our reach continued to grow. But that was my chance to work with a young, anonymous, chubby 19-year-old kid named Johnny Gargano. Not sure what ever happened to him. Probably in a homeless shelter somewhere. It was my chance to work with the young Gregory Iron and a young Matthew Justice and Bobby Beverly and Ricky Shane Page And so many names that came out of that part of the country, Jake Christ, guys like that who had huge runs ahead of them, whether we're talking about 440, whether we're talking about getting contracts, whatever the case is. And it was my chance to work more creatively, which I'd helped a little bit in one PW, but I was able to really take the reins in PWO, Pro Wrestling Ohio Prime Wrestling, and again, it's understanding your talent. It's understanding the right positions to put your talent in to get the best out of them. And loved working with Johnny, loved working with Greg. We gelled so well and so naturally, and did so many great stories on through the years. And you can go through Jimmy Jacobs and Zach Gowen and Brody Lee and Madison Rain and all the great talent that came through that door over the years. We did on a shoestring budget, barely able to get by, barely able to make ends meet. But again, it's a lot of passionate people. And it was a full circle moment for me, too, because the very first wrestler that I fell in love with back on the undercard of Jerry Lawler versus Kamala in 2002 was Matt Cross. And Matt Cross lived in Cleveland, still does. And now he was my top star. So it just shows you how quickly things move in the wrestling business. To be able to work with those guys on such a deep and close level. And all of those episodes are on my my streaming channel right now, ProWrestlingLibrary.com. You can subscribe for a low price every month and get over 500 hours of content, or you can rent the episodes individually. But we did 191 episodes, and no other project has had more of myself, my personal grit in it than that show. So I'm still so proud of it. And, some of the things don't hold up as well. Some of the early production is a little rough, and some of the content maybe wouldn't necessarily jive with audiences the same way it did back then. But the big things we did, I'm still so proud of the moments we were able to create with guys. And gosh, with Johnny Gargano growing into my Hogan, my Austin, my Cena, whatever analogy you want to use. Johnny would probably prefer I said, my Shawn Michaels. But how do you miss? I mean, Johnny was everything. Like he could wrestle, he could talk, he could project bigger than he was. He could do the charity events. He could be a good guy. He could be a villain. He can make you laugh. He can make you tense up. Johnny had range like no one else in that company had range. And for my money, with the exception of maybe a Corey Graves, maybe a Joaquin Wilde, who was also extensively part of PWO. But not even them, honestly. I think they both excelled in huge ways in their own. I don't know if either of them had the range Johnny did. So it was my pleasure to help give Johnny some of his first big TV moments. And anytime I see him today, I'm proud, but I'm not surprised because he always had it in him.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll obviously fast forward to 2010, where you became a big part of obviously Ring of Honor. Talk about that experience.
Jimmy Jacobs helped get me in Ring of Honor, and I'm forever indebted to him and Kerry Silkin and Adam Pearce and all the management crew around that time. They didn't have a regular DVD commentator to work with Dave Prazak because Lenny Leonard had left after Dave Sapolsky left. So TV was Prazak and Mike Hogwood, and they had just announced that Kevin Kelly would be heading up the pay-per-views. But they didn't have a month-to-month DVD guy, and Jimmy recommended me to Adam Pearce and Kerry Silkin, and they gave me a shot, and I had a great 9-month run there doing that and working with, my first weekend in, I called Tyler Black's world title win, now known as Seth Rollins. First weekend in, I'm head first in the Kevin Steen El Generico rivalry. And who would have thought 13 years later they're still inseparable? At that point, I was 24, still very young, still nowhere near my prime. But eventually they decided to consolidate those announced teams and have it be Kevin and Dave, and eventually Kevin and Nigel. So it became more of a case of me filling in when needed, once or twice a year. I had that late era Undertaker schedule. I just show up once a year, do my thing, leave. Don't see me again until next year. But I was grateful for it, and I really wasn't regularly around again until Kevin left, and then Ian Riccaboni bumped into the Kevin chair, and then I bumped up into the Ian chair, which was doing Future of Honor in 2017, where I could work with the young talent. Like Cheeseburger and Eli Isom and Brian Johnson and all the guys that are coming out of Monster Factory and out of the ROH dojo, and just the young prospects around the country. It's how I first worked with Luchasaurus and Chris Bay and Griff Garrison, and so many guys have gone to cool things. So Ring of Honor was an important part of my journey because it was the first national promotion that believed in me and took a chance on me. And while I was still a little young for my first run, I'm very proud of that body of work. Working with Steve Corino was a night off. Steve is so easy to play off of, and he's such a great character. Can't say enough good things about Steve. And Prazak was great. Nothing but love for everybody I worked with at Ring of Honor. And it's got a special place in my heart, man. Hammerstein Ballroom, New York City. My first time working in New York. The Brooklyn Cyclones field and Brooklyn, New York for Base Brawl, or Field of Honor is what I call it, actually. Field of Honor. To ECW Arena, to Center Stage in Atlanta. There's so many historic venues I was at as far as Ring of Honor. But at that point, I was just struggling to keep up and struggling to, okay, the quality of the wrestling's up here. Maybe I'm around here. How do I get as close to here as I can get? And I gave it hell, and I'm just thankful that they believed enough in me, much like IWC so many years ago. Ring of Honor believed enough in me to keep me on that radar and keep me coming back.
Absolutely. So obviously in 2013, you're obviously a content producer. Now you worked on the title, The Montreal Theory. Now some of the guys on this channel actually are big Bret Hart fans, so I know they might be listening to this a little bit.
Well, Montreal Theory, was my attempt at capitalizing on the passion people have for conspiracy theories. And unfortunately, with the way the world has gone over the past 3 to 4 years, I don't think being a conspiracy theorist is necessarily as fun and creative as it used to be. Unfortunately, a lot of people have weaponized that and used it for a political agenda and used it to just say some really nonsensical, crazy, out of this world stuff. And I don't subscribe to the type of conspiracy theories that think that there's lizard people among us and all of these weird political talking points that are just based on blind speculation. But my conspiracy theories I enjoyed was, hey, can we scientifically prove we landed on the moon? Hey, JFK. Hey, crop circles. Like things like that you can analyze and say, well, I mean, that's an interesting point based on that evidence, but I read this right here, and then you can see this video clip here. Jesse Ventura had his show that dealt with conspiracy theories, and I was always intrigued by the conspiracy theory. What if Montreal and the screw job wasn't real? What if it was a premeditated plan between Brett and Vince, or between Brett and Vince and Sean? What if it was thought out 6 months in advance? What if it was thought out 6 hours in advance? Do any of these theories make sense? Which one's more plausible? Are any of them plausible? Are any of them possible? And what we did was we retraced basically the 18-month stretch of time between WrestleMania 12 and the Survivor Series in Montreal. And we retold the story. Here was the timeline of what everybody was doing. And now let's take that timeline and let's play with it a little bit. Let's twist it. Does it make sense for something to be happening beneath the surface? And there were people I interviewed that were skeptics and thought Brett was in on it. Steve Carino being the most notable. And there were others we interviewed that thought, no way, not possible. And all we did was give them both a platform, and we let the viewer decide what they think. And I had so many people since then say, thank you so much for making that, because I don't believe Brett was in on it, but man, that was intriguing as hell to think about. Or I never thought Brett was in on it until I listened to some of your theories on here from some of your panel. Now I think he was. And there's a morality lesson here that applies to the real world as far as ask questions, gain knowledge, and form an intelligent opinion based off of that knowledge. Don't blindly speculate. Don't recklessly speak out of turn about what you feel might be true or hope might be true. There's a pragmatic, logical way to gain information. And people can see it to this day, ProWrestlingLibrary.com, on my streaming channel, or DVDs at joe-dombrowski.com. I do ship internationally, but it's not cheap. But yeah, I had a lot of fun making it. I made a lot of mistakes because it was my first, and I would do it a lot differently now. But I was very intrigued by the subject matter, and it was a huge success. And if it hadn't been, then anything I had produced in-house since then might not have happened. So I'm very thankful for Montreal Theatre.
Yeah, I know. Obviously, before we came on the air, I was looking at some of the products, and the two which caught my eye was the missing matches. One from AJ Styles, and I think it was Samoa Joe, the other one as well. I thought that's pretty interesting because these obviously matches out there which fans don't get to see. Do you know what I mean?
And I stole that missing matches name from the VHS series I had as a kid, where I watched Jerry Lawler versus Kamala. So it all connects. You can see. But yeah, I mean, and all I would say 95% or more of everything on those AJ 2 sets and the one Samoa Joe set are matches I called. So this is just content I have sitting in my personal collection that wasn't doing anything. And so few people had ever seen it, because maybe the local independent promotion sold it. Maybe like a High Spots or something like that carried it. But again, pre-streaming, linear internet channels, YouTube was still around. It was growing, but you weren't putting as many free matches on there as people do now. So this has an audience. And between the Q&As and the interviews that we added on as well, and the fact both were and still are prominently on television, to me it was a can't miss. I want to do more like that later on down the line, because now I've got a nice library of Lee Moriarty matches and Trey Miguel matches and things of that nature, and their stars continue to rise. But yeah, it was a lot of fun digging back in. And again, I was young and I was green, and some of my stuff's kind of rough listening back to it. But AJ and Joe were always quality competitors. And if you're a fan of both, there's no way in this day and age you can have all their matches. So there's something on there new for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll also fast forward to 2016. You returned to regular booking and producing live events under two brands, PCW and PCW.
Premier Championship Wrestling was my return to producing and booking in Cleveland. I had left in 2013 after the PWO TV run had ended, and it was a former fan of that program that reached out to me and wanted to promote shows and wanted me on board. And I was skeptical at first because, again, it's very challenging. It's very trying. It takes a lot out of you. To me, it's the most mentally exhausting job in wrestling. and most time consuming. But as time went on, it felt right. And it was my chance to work again with Matt Cross, and right before he got signed, Johnny Gargano, and a whole new crop of talent coming up from the Cleveland and the Pittsburgh and the surrounding areas, like Wardlow, Lee Moriarty, Atticus Cogar, who's blown up so big doing the deathmatch scene, Zoe Sky, Ray Lynn, who's now on Women of Wrestling, Trey Miguel, Myron Reed, Ace Austin. The list goes on and on and on of talent that was able to pass through Cleveland and work underneath me. And we didn't have TV. It was a lot smaller scale. And rather than write television, my goal was prepping talent for the next step, taking the young guys and girls and putting them in situations they weren't normally in. Hands-on promos, longer story arcs, things that brought out their timing, their drama, their facial expressions, things that you don't get on a normal independent promotion. But I'm going to look for, and I'm going to make sure you have. Because one day you're going to be in front of a big TV company and you're going to feel comfortable doing this because I made you uncomfortable doing it now and you didn't want to. And I take no credit for anybody beyond maybe taking them and turning them a little bit in this direction, giving them a little nudge where they need to go. But I would like to think a lot of those guys and girls that have found bigger success, at least that mindset kicked off, doing stuff under the Premier banner and thinking, well, it's more than just the live crowd. It's more than just the match. Let's expand my horizons and really see what else is out there.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. So obviously now since 2020, you're part of obviously MLW. Talk about obviously how you went into MLW.
I knew my time at Ring of Honor was over. When COVID hit, my job basically got eliminated because my job was hosting Future of Honor. And now that they're doing closed set tapings and talent has to quarantine for a week, they're not doing extra stuff. They're doing the bare minimum to produce television and getting out. So I was on the sidelines and I did not work. My last Ring of Honor event was February 2020. And finally, I decided time to move on in mid-2021 because there's nothing for me here. And I don't know if that's because management maybe only saw me in a certain light or because the resources just weren't available to have a spot for me that was larger. Either one. There was no upward mobility. So, and I was not under contract, so there was nothing beholding me there. So I reached out to a few different people. And it's actually Kevin Kelly that suggested that I talk to MLW. And Kevin's hunch or whatever he had heard through the grapevine proved true. Because Court Bauer, I think, had heard me do Triple Mania before for AAA. And obviously he has a very obvious, deep lucha presence in his broadcasts. And I think we had maybe talked in July, and I was signed in August to start in September, and then on the TV show regularly by October. And I've been there ever since, almost 2 years now. And it's where I wanted to be. But again, everything's connected, right? Everything is part of the journey. Doing episodic TV in Cleveland for 6 years at PWO, not just booking, but hosting it. I understood what was needed. I understood, all right, we got to cut to break. All right, we got to plug what's still to come. All right, we have to make this palatable for a casual audience that may just be tuning in for the first time. Because I already thought that way for 6 years because I had to. So that helped the transition into doing television be a lot more seamless than if you brought in a guy who had just done standalone independent shows. And Rich Bocchini, a dear friend of mine, loved working with him. Matt Stryker is the only announcer I've worked with in 3 different countries now. So it's great to be reunited with him weekly at this point. MLW was where I wanted to be all along because it was doing episodic television on a big scale and being able to tell those stories and reach an audience the same way the announcers that I grew up watching reached me. So very happy with MLW and very happy with the product because to me, it's not just hybrid styles, but it's a hybrid of so many great things about pro wrestling because you've got your high-end production elements that a show of the day needs, but it still hasn't lost its edge and its grit that people may remember from ECW or the Attitude Era or Mid-South. And it's got Lucha Libre, and it's got Japanese strong style, and it's got the big muscle heads, but it's got athletic muscle guys. It's not the lumbering big men of the past. And it's got the middleweights who can move lightning fast. And it's got the generational talents like Davey Boy Smith Jr. and obviously the Samoan SWAT team to where that family tradition is very prevalent. So to me, MLW borrows from everybody and everything. And as a result, what you get is something very unique unto itself.
Oh, wow. Absolutely amazing. That's unbelievable. So a couple of fans got the chance to obviously ask some questions, and I've got a couple here. So Shane Webster sent obviously 2 questions, so I'll do the first one first was, what's your fondest memory of the original 1PW?
I'll tell you my most vivid memory first. My most vivid memory was Abyss chokeslamming Ulf Herman through a flaming thumbtack covered table. And I had never been a part of something with more energy, more chaos. It was like the moment was overwhelming me. There was just so much going on. And I'll never forget how I felt. My fondest memory, first and foremost, are the fans. I know that's cliche. And, yeah, the fans, yay. No, it's not a cheap pop. I'm really saying this. Because I had never been ringside surrounded by that many people who were that wrestling starved and that excited for everybody and everything in front of them, from reacting to the dangerous moves like that, to singing along with AJ Styles' theme song, to staying hot and energetic for 4 or 5 hours because we ran so freaking long every time. And beyond that, just the young talent I was able to interact with. And hey, Corey Graves' first ever international booking came through us. I met Spud, Drake Maverick, through 1PW, and immediately he became my favorite talent because not just because of what he did in the ring, because of what he did up here, because of his understanding and grasp. And you look at him from TNA to WWE to anywhere, he has embraced every role. He's overachieved every time.
Mm-hmm.
And he has created jobs for himself if they didn't exist. And I'm so proud of him and have so much respect for him. Pac is another one. I met my last trip over there, the man that gravity forgot. And it's so wild to see what he's done and how far he's come since then. Referee Andy Quilden, who went on to be the Rev Pro promoter, I met in my first run there. So seeing where those guys are now is such a trip. But nothing jumps out more than just the crowd being on top of everybody and everything, and them being on fire for almost everything we did.
A second part of his question was, what's the UK wrestling scene like compared to the US scene?
At the time, I would say a lot more undiscovered talent, because back in the day, US fans really didn't know anybody unless their name was Johnny, Jody, or Doug. And fast forward to now, between, of course, the obvious choices like your Will Ospreays and your Zack Sabre Jr.'s, but on down to Leon Slater, and Mark Haskins and Cara Noir, and all these guys who are starting to get out there and find brand new audiences. I haven't been in the trenches of the UK scene like I have the US to tell you, how political it is, or how how much drama there is, or the difficulty of getting booked or traveling from town to town. But I can say that the one biggest similarity is the passion all the talent has, and the fact that there's so many that you feel is right on that cusp, ready to break out, or has had that little taste of maybe NXT UK or Impact, and they're ready for a bigger run now. Everybody's there for the right reason, right? To steal the show and to absolutely kill it in their match and continue to grow. And I feel more energy in the UK because I think the US is a little more oversaturated. And at the same time, I feel like that drives talent more because maybe there's a little bit less opportunities. There's more now than there were because, again, the world's a lot smaller. But the first thing I think of is just how much talent is there and how much talent from there I'm going to be watching on television in the next 3 years.
Wow, amazing. So one final question as those who begin to wind down. You've had an amazing career, obviously 20 years, 20 and a half, 20 years. What's left for Joe to do, should I say?
There's always a next. And if there's not, you get complacent. And one of the things I'm most proud of is how I've been able to diversify myself, where I'm not just making money doing one thing. I am a commentator. I am also a ring announcer and a voiceover artist and a producer and a booker and a merchandiser and a content creator and a restorer of lost footage, and so many things I've been able to do. And so many of those jobs will never be done. There's always going to be new footage to find. Who would have thought that the Heartland Wrestling Association WWF house shows were right under my nose? The Brian Pillman Memorial shows that had been mythical for 20 years were at my grasp. But they were, thanks to Les Thatcher. And now they're on ProWrestlingLibrary.com for the world to see. Who would have thought some of the stuff I put on my YouTube channel that I don't even know what the hell it is, but I've had it in my collection. I can give new light to territory footage from the 1970s, 8mm reels, all this stuff. There's more projects I'm working on. There's more projects of footage I have in hand that no one's ever seen, that people have wanted to see for a lot of years. And I'll be the one to bring it to them. Not in the timeline I've wanted to, because of schedule and travel and mental health and a lot of reasons, but it's still going to happen. MLW still has to grow. And if my future long-term is an MLW, I would love to be there and grow with it. If my future's somewhere else, then we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But my goal has always been to be as financially solvent as possible, doing what I love and only what I love. Because if you live life on your own terms, I think that's the key to happiness, and that's the true definition of freedom. So I've spent 20 years building a foundation and building a house. And now the next 20 years, hopefully, we keep adding to that house. We keep adding floors. We keep adding rooms. We keep adding luxuries. And that could be a metaphor for anything you want, whether it's the next project, the next booking, the next flight, the next state, the next country, whatever it is. But as long as there are stories to be told and there are fans that are ready to hear them and learn from them, whether it's the 18-year-old Leon Slater coming up now, or whether it's something that happened in 1971 that everybody's forgotten about, or anywhere in between. I want to be there to tell that story. I want to be there to put my name on it. And I want to be there to go down in history with that moment, enhancing it for the audience, making it as good as it can be.
And that's an amazing thing to end on. Wow. Joe, thank you so much for obviously taking the time to talk to us. Before we do our outro, is there anything you want to plug, my friend?
I want to plug everything.
Go for it.
We're going to be live on Fight Plus on Saturday, July 8th for MLW Never Say Never. It's our first live special since I've been in the company. Our first live special post-COVID. Alex Hammerstone defends the world title he's held for 2 years against the Battle Riot winner, Alex Kane. We've got the Samoan SWAT team against Ricky Shane Page and Akira for the tag team titles. Timothy Thatcher is going to be there against Tracy Williams in a scientific dream match. We're going to have a interpromotional matchup as Delmi Exo puts the MLW featherweight title against the WXW women's champion Ava Everett, and a whole lot more. And then a week from then, on Saturday, July 15th, I'm doing Triple Mania 31 Tijuana, El Hijo del Vikingo versus Kenny Omega, the rematch. We all saw Omega win on Dynamite. Omega's a former Mega champion. He had to forfeit when he got hurt, when he lost the AEW world title. Vikingo won the vacant title. He's held it ever since. Vikingo and Omega have never fought for that title, but it's happening live July 15th, AAA, Triple Mania Tijuana. Both those events will be on Fight TV, and you can follow me on Twitter at Joe_Dombrowski, Instagram at Joseph_Dombrowski, or pick up a DVD at joe-dombrowski.com or my streaming channel at prowrestlinglibrary.com. Support what you want, support with your dollar, because that's how we spread what we love and appreciate about pro wrestling the most, positive energy. So please feel free to check any of those out. I will be a part of them in some form or fashion.
There you go. There you go. That's all from me. Don't forget, Wrestling with the Paranormal is back tomorrow. Magical Wrestling is back on Saturday. And, of course, All Left in Wrestling Show on Sunday. That's all from me. Joe, thank you so much again. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you on the next one. Magic Man out.